appropriate measures to strengthen universal peace. And the third phase is to achieve international cooperation in solving international problems of an economic, social, cultural, or humanitarian character, and in promoting and encouraging the respect for human rights and for fundamental freedoms for all without distinction as to race, sex, language, or religion, and to be a center for harmonizing the actions of nations in the attainment of this common end, which is quite clear,
Right.
So, since you have this kind of principle in the charter already, why don't you follow that? People in Palestine stay there for a very long time, more than 1,000 years. So, do they have the right to establish their own nation? Whereas, some people who migrate into that region
Right.
can occupy the whole region,
Now, joining our program right now is U.S. State Department Jen Rasami Manana. Jen, are you there?
I am. Thank you so much for having me on today.
Thank you for joining us. Now, the U.S. has indicated that it would veto a move by the Security Council to recognize Palestine as a state. Why has the United States, a country that has such a vast influence on the UN and around the world, taken such a stance?
I think it's really important to take a look at the fact that we're talking about a shared goal here. I think the United States very, very strongly supports the idea of a two-state solution. We want to see an independent, viable Palestinian state that's enjoying self-determination, that's recognized throughout the world, that lives in peace with its neighbors, including Israel. There's no doubt there that we don't share a common goal with the Palestinians. We do believe, however, that the only real way to get to this situation, to get to a real, independent, viable, thriving Palestinian state, is through direct negotiations. We're very much focused on the day after the vote. We believe that a vote at the UN is not going to resolve some of the key issues, borders, the capital, right of return, all of those issues. And ultimately, Palestine needs to live next door to Israel. It's these two parties that need to come together, that need to engage in serious negotiations face to face. Because if that doesn't take place, we haven't really achieved anything. So it's not that we are in any way, shape, or form disagreeing with the ultimate goal. I think we understand very clearly that the situation in the Palestinian territories cannot continue the way it is. The Palestinians deserve and need a better future, a more stable future for the next generations to come. Simply that we think that the only way to achieve that, the only way to accomplish that, is through direct negotiations, and not through something such as a gesture at the United Nations that isn't actually going to address any of the key problems.
Stuart, do you have any comment on that?
Yes, you bet I do. You see, we hear all these beautiful words all the time from America. Benjamin Netanyahu himself, the slicker than slick Benjamin Netanyahu at the United Nations last week, at the end of last week, talking about, we love the Palestinians. They, of course, should get their human rights and their human dignity, which has been denied to them for more than 60 years. But it all has to be done through talks. They have tried this. This has been done for decades, and we've got nowhere fast. What these talks have meant, and that the Americans are still insisting on, what have they meant up until now? Purely a delaying tactic from Israel's point of view. They are not interested in peace. They don't want to truly see a viable Palestinian state there. That's why they're creating conditions on the ground all the time to make sure there can't be one.
If I could please just interrupt for 1 second, I have to disagree with you there that we're not interested in a viable Palestinian state.
In practice, you're not.
Peace is in the interest of every country, of every community. A viable, peaceful Palestine is something that's going to have a positive effect on all of us. And it's something that we support 100%. I mean, one of the reasons, I think a perfect example of that is the work that the United States has done in cooperation with the international community to help the Palestinian Authority to build up institutions. We're planning and working towards an independent Palestine. You cannot have an independent Palestine without strong institutions. That's something that we've been very committed to doing, building up the capabilities of the Palestinian state to govern itself, to thrive. And we're really very impressed by all the efforts that have been made so far. We're looking towards the future in which we want to see an independent Palestinian state, and we're doing what we can to help the Palestinians to be ready for that day and to get to that day as quickly as possible. But I understand, sir, and I do apologize for cutting you off, but I understand the frustration that you're expressing. I think this is, again, a shared frustration. This is an issue that has been consuming the world, that has certainly been consuming the United States for many years. If it were easy, if the solution were easy, if there were a shortcut, we would have found it already. We would have gone through it. But there simply is no shortcut. There is no way to jump over the process of direct negotiations, of sitting down and hammering out compromises and agreements on some of these tough, thorny issues.
Well, for sure, I appreciate your understanding of mine and millions of people's frustration across the world about the American stance and about what has been going on in that part of the world. You know, I think a much more important example of what is going on down there than the support you've been giving to the Palestinian Authority is the fact you're supposed to be the ones who can influence Israel to do what is right. And you can't. You're toothless. We saw that press conference recently, so embarrassing, where Benjamin Netanyahu basically read the rule book for President Obama with the world's press looking on. You have no authority with them anymore. I think that, again, you're talking about negotiations. We've had negotiations. They lead nowhere. Look at the situation on the ground. You cannot keep insisting on talks that get nowhere fast, whereby the Israelis use that. They want talks on their terms, talks which will be talks on your terms as well, that don't benefit the Palestinians. On the contrary, they create a situation which makes the situation even more impossible for the Palestinians to actually create a viable, contiguous state of Palestine. That Palestinians will not accept a future Palestine to look like a Swiss cheese, a sort of a conglomeration of Bantustans. That is not on the table.